Okay, let's talk about the technical framework document conventions. All technical frameworks, no matter what domain they're in, must have these 5 conventions. They call them conventions. In a minute, we'll talk about the radiology technical framework documents specifically. They have 7 sections. But all, doesn't matter whether in cardiology, pathology, have these 5 conventions, or really their sections. Section 1 is the diagram tables of IHE actors and transactions. 2 is the process flow diagrams. 3 is the security implications. And those 3 are pretty obvious. Section 1 tells you what the actors and transactions are using diagrams and tables. 2 tells you how the flow is supposed to work for this profile using diagrams. And 3 tells you what security practices or implications are involved in this profile. I want to be real clear here that Convention 1 and Convention 2 both have diagrams. They both have data in picture form. That might be important in a quiz later. For the content modules. Content modules are a little harder to understand. Consider how an image is transmitted to PACS. It gets packaged up into a preamble, prefix, DICOM header, and image pixel data. So the message framework is very different from the actual content of the message, which is just the image. To keep the message structure concept and the message content separate, IHE uses content modules that deal specifically with the message content. Content modules are defined by a number of standards. In our case, it would be HL7 and DICOM. So that's the overview and general requirements for all the technical frameworks across all domains. Now let's talk about the radiology technical framework. The current technical framework is revision 17.0. It has 4 volumes. Volume 1 is the integration profiles. Volume 2 is the transactions, RAD 1 through RAD 29. Volume 3 is transactions, RAD 30 through RAD 75. And Volume 4 is the national extensions. National extensions extend the IHE framework to other nations, and so far it extends to France, Germany, United States, Italy, United Kingdom, Canada, and Spain. This is what the cover of Volume 1 looks like. So here you can see it's the Radiology Technical Framework, starting in Volume 1, and you can see the version and when that version was adopted. This is what the contents page of Volume 1 looks like. Again, this is really just a big book, and you can see that the transactions often include the profiles that we've been talking about. The IHE Radiology Technical Framework transaction volumes have the same 7 sections. Again, this is specific to radiology, and they have the same 7 sections for all 75 transactions. Those 7 sections are scope, use case roles, reference standards, interaction diagram, trigger events, message semantics, and expected actions. So here's a definition of each of these actions. Scope. Scope gives you an explanation of what the transaction is about. Use case roles gives a visual representation of the transactions. It lists the actors and their roles. Reference standards lists what standards are being referenced in the transactions. Interaction diagram, a visual representation of how the transaction works. Trigger events, list of events that trigger the transaction. Message semantics, the message language of the transaction. The expected actions, what happens in a normal transaction of this type. Last year on the final exam, I wrote a question that said, in the 7 sections of a radiology transaction, how many use visual representations? And 2/3 of the class said 1, the interaction diagram. But if you look closely, the use case roles give a visual representation of the transactions. The use case role is really a picture, and the interaction diagram is really a picture. So don't be fooled by that question on your test. When I ask you how many visual representations there are in the 7 sections of a radiology transaction, you're going to want to say 2. So here it is. Here is RAD 15, right? And it starts with scope. Here's the scope section. And then there's the use case role. And as I've been emphasizing, the use case role is a picture. And it lists the actor and what role that plays, and the actor and what role it plays. And then the RAD 15 continues. It lists the reference standards, which is DICOM in this case. And then you have the interaction diagram. When this happens, a C-find should go this way, and then a C-find should come back. You have the trigger events, and you have the message semantics, and finally you have the expected actions. Those are the 7 sections of a radiology transaction within the technical framework. Thank you for watching.